So why don't we have to wait for sharding? If you don't mind explaining.
Because there are two different layers of the stack. So like the scaling layer, I mean, it touches how the data is stored and how the consensus is formed. But the execution layer is kind of, considered separately in my mind, at least, and I think most people's minds. You can do a lot. You can change out the execution layer of things without running into many problems, as long as it's compatible and you have like developer buy-in and all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
And it also just needs to be a more smooth transition. Like if Ethereum 2.0 comes in 2 years and everything is different all at once, then it won't get adoption. It has to be smooth.
Yeah. It seems like, at least within the EWASM project, there's a lot of work being done on like translators for all of these various languages to and from each other. So I feel like if the EVM 2.0 team makes a translator, that will definitely alleviate some of the headaches.
Yeah, those translators are really frightening to me, because there's a lot that is not, like, I know we have KEVM that we can use to check that things are operating as they're expected to, and we have a robust set of tests, but I still imagine that there's some edge case in that translation that we're not going to realize until much later, and we've all been relying on like this automatic translation from EVM to EWASM, and it's not going to be trivial to. I know it seems trivial, but it's not. And
yeah, that's fair.
It's going to be concerning.
It also forces developers to put a lot of trust in these tools, especially if they don't understand how they work.
Yeah, it's putting a lot of layers into the technical complexity, and each layer you add is another opportunity for security vulnerabilities. So I think that's something to keep in mind.
I think we can all agree that WASM is a much nicer virtual machine than EVM, and I think there's a lot of tools that we could leverage and all that sort of stuff. But having said that, it's kind of like efforts to replace the JVM or efforts to replace the CLR for .NET. Like, interesting work, but you don't want to end up with like a Perl 6 moment where like people have been working on a ton of stuff. There's been person years worth of effort, and then the community just does not adopt it because it's never going to be good enough.
Yeah. I do like the fact that WASM is not Ethereum specific, though, and it seems like there are some pretty large companies that are actively working on it. So I don't think WASM is going to die out, even if Ethereum doesn't adopt it.
No, I don't think it's going to die. I meant EWASM itself.
Gotcha. Yeah.
If you look at the design specs for EWASM, there's some like, this is how we're going to add in gas, and this is the way we're going to remove determinism, and those sorts of things. There are some things that we have to make specific to Ethereum. And that's what I think would die is that sort of thing. You don't want to have like a Ethereum 3000 sort of moment where you have to do this in order to switch over to EWASM, and folks just don't do it.
Yeah.
Even at the worst case, we're still looking at like a Python 2.3 thing where it's going to take many, many, many years to port everyone over.
Yeah, the only risk I see there is the only risk I see there is that if it's years and years, you run into the potential that another blockchain would take over that is much simpler than Ethereum, or already have those sorts of things like EOS or something like this.
Do you think the fact that Ethereum is a decentralized system makes that a little bit less likely to happen than in the case of like Python 2 or 3? Just considering like the virtual machine itself is getting updated.
But you still have to have folks go out and do the updates, right? Like the miners.
All the miners would still have to update their clients.
Right. Yeah. It's the same thing with if you have a vulnerability in like Nginx or something like that. Like you can release the fix, but if folks don't come to actually apply it, large swaths of the net are still vulnerable to things, you know?
Yeah.
And it's a much broader problem than that. I think the miners are probably the easiest people to upgrade because they just run a different version of software. You're talking about changing the entire like back end stack that many companies are now using to develop their products. So that's not trivial efforts.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I just mean if the miners don't come, you're certainly not going to get those folks to come, you know?
Yeah, I think that's the reason why it was originally, thinking of tying all of the things together. It's like, oh, you're going to get this benefit and that benefit and that benefit. So like you package it all up and everyone adopts it. But I think it's just too much technical risk packaging all these things together, and it's going to take too long.
Nope, I don't disagree with you at all.
Yeah. So that's what was happening the past couple of weeks.
Cool. Thanks for the update.
Sure.
Totally. Yeah, so I'm going to share out a link to the beginnings of like the community wish list. Let's see. And it's super simple right now, just based off of what had come out of the learnings. And basically the hope with this is that people can add like different specific tools or projects they would like to see funded, so we can move forward and like actually use the community and the knowledge to like keep momentum and building new needed community projects. That's probably a bit redundant of a statement, but so yeah, if you click into that, please feel free to add anything you'd like to see happen, or like underneath the infrastructure tooling auditing fund, like what do we want to see be audited, or what tooling do we wish we had higher confidence in, that it's more community level, because one of my ambitions is to begin to actually seek funding for specific things. We've seen some of the projects, like the benchmark stuff, start to get traction and people are contributing to it, or like the wiki, Corey and other folks are helping to maintain. But if we could, even if it's a small amount of value that we can help contribute towards those efforts, it might make that burden a little less, or at least they're compensated for that burden, and it'll help the community to grow and thrive. Yeah, that's the goal with this little project. Does anybody have any reactions or clarifying questions?
I think in terms of an idea for a project that could be done, at Denver as a hackathon project, we were talking about debugger. That might be a good project to stick on there.
Sure. Well, on Trail of Bits last call, we had talked about the Trail of Bits debugger that was made at East Berlin.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have I was going to say there's that symbolic debugger that we talked about last time.
Yeah,
we
that's super.
posted into chat. I think I'll check, Brian and Kevin, if you'd like. I can check what the status of that being merged into the repo is. We're reorganizing Manticore at the moment, so I don't know if that was moved in or if it has to be like put into a different repository, but I can follow up on that.
Okay, and maybe a secondary is like add Viper support or something.
Yeah, I mean we have an experiment to add Viper to Slither. There's already some partial support there that we've experimented with. So yeah, I don't think Viper would be that, famous last words, but I don't think it would be that overwhelming to add to other things as well. But I can't promise you that just yet.
Yeah. I mean, and then Jacques also has a Viper debug library that he's kind of maintaining right now. Converging the two would be nice.
Yep. Cool. Yeah. So I guess this can start. Maybe I'll post this to the repo, and we can start an actual like public facing wish list that people can update as they see fit.
Yeah.
I guess one other thing that happened, more significant vulnerability, was the upstream NPM security vulnerability that happened this past week. Anybody have any reactions or points on that?
Not anything that wasn't already said.
Cool. Yeah, just trying to throw out some fodder for discussion.
I think that one's interesting because it's driven more discussion on funding and like open source projects and how they're funded and how they're maintained and all this stuff. That's the right level of conversation I think that needs to happen in result of that.
Right. It's a different kind of vulnerability.
Yeah.
It was actually interesting. Joe Rosner on Twitter, I had made a joke about how people were using code that they were like not paying for and did no due diligence on, and then were surprised there was a problem with it. But Joe Rosner actually reached out to the Cargo folks. So that's Rust's packaging system. And they actually have flags for when things are deprecated, and it marks up the tree that like you're using something that hasn't been maintained in a while or hasn't been or is deprecated itself, and you should review it as well. Now, they don't have community support for that yet, so you can't like as a community vote and say like, hey, this package is old, but they're looking to move towards that direction, which I thought was super interesting.
So like based on timestamps, basically. Yeah,
like. Right now, a maintainer themselves actually has to go in and say, I no longer maintain this. So, don't rely on it to be fresh or, have updates or anything. But it would be very interesting to see where they take that and maybe pull some of the same things for EthSecurity or whatever we go to eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's super cool, I think.
What project did you say that was?
That's Cargo. It's part of their TOML, which is the configuration file for Cargo.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's the EthPM for Rust, basically. It's the NPM for Rust, kind of.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'll send you links to it, Kevin, so you have the links to the discussion where that was had.
Cool.
It might be an interesting thing for EthPM as a part of that spec.
All right. Anything else people want to chat about or want to go through? I don't know.
Yeah. So I had a thought about the cargo system. I mean, would it make more sense if maintainers had to explicitly say that they are still maintaining a project every, I don't know, month or so, maybe every 2 weeks?
Like a heartbeat.
Yeah, I can see how the UX would be worse on that, but I feel like there are a lot of ways to automate a system like that.
Yeah.
If a Git commit, for example, is pushed or an issue is closed, then it's still being maintained.
But
version is released.
The only issue with that is if you have something that's in like long-term support.
That's fair.
It's like, yes, we're still maintaining it, but we only do releases every 6 months because that's reasonable for us, and we don't really have anything in between because, I know what you're saying, Alex. I was pondering that myself. And it's really hard to figure out something that benefits the community without annoying the heck out of people who are actually writing this code too.
Sure. Yeah. That makes sense. It just seems like it would be more of a passive process for other people. Like if a maintainer stops maintaining, they don't need to say, they're no longer doing it.
But if you develop some sort of passive heuristic kind of method, then you're always going to miss something.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair.
So you can maybe specify like what type of heuristic you want to use. Like this is a new project, so it should see active development, or this is like a long-term service project that really shouldn't because like there's no reason to. And then they can make different decisions on how to figure out if something's doing well or something is kind of unmaintained.
Sure. Yeah. I guess there could be like classifications of maintenance status. Like if you're, pushing certain types of commits, or if you have certain types of issues being closed, then you meet X status for maintenance.
Or it would actually be kind of cool to be like, this is our release cycle every 6 months. Yeah. And, if you're out more than 150% of that, then there's a problem.
I will say that I think that false positives are probably preferable to false negatives in this scenario, simply because a false negative could correspond to a security vulnerability, where a false positive is just inconvenient in a way.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on what you do with it, right? If you just say like, hey, go poke the developer and make sure they're still breathing, that's fine. If you fail the build though, that could get annoying really fast.
Yeah, I think to piggyback on that, like there's always going to be a point at which something is too annoying, even in a scenario like this.
Yeah.
I guess going back to the debugger conversation, so I've been thinking for a long time that it's kind of annoying how Solidity specific a lot of these debuggers are.
Yeah.
So for example, the Remix debugger, it provides a debugger for EVM bytecode, but it doesn't actually let you debug raw EVM bytecode. It only allows you to use that debugger with Solidity. Now, like the backend tool is much more general, but I haven't seen any like clean integration that allows you to do, debugging on straight bytecode. Have you guys seen anything for that purpose?
Yeah, I think that, so Jacques made this Viper debug tool, and he's the main guy that works on the Viper project, and he tried to make it a little bit general too, like have it import the source code to like machine code mapping, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah. To try to figure that out, but it's difficult because it's not always one-to-one.
Do you think there would be interest for just a straight bytecode debugger? Because I've thought about building that before, and I would be more than happy to build at Singapore.
When we were in Berlin, there was massive. That was like the most everyone said that they were interested in having be built, and then nobody did it.
What's funny is I thought about building it there.
Yeah, Alex, I remember you specifically saying you wanted to build that.
And then we built a state channel instead.
I think it would be easy to actually find grant money for this too.
I'd be very interested in starting on something like that if we had some funding.
And then Martin from EF, the EthSecurity team, said he would be definitely willing to help, like give pointers and stuff like that.
Sweet. Is that Martin who worked on EWASM?
I don't know if he works on EWASM, but Martin Swinday, he's like the EthSecurity guy.
Okay, gotcha.
Would you guys be willing to add that to the list that's linked in the chat here?
Yeah,
the bytecode?
There's so many debuggers, just making them all kind of interoperable.
Yeah.
The Viper debug one uses the PyEVM backend, but I definitely see the value in a symbolic backend for it.
I think having more just EVM bytecode tools is probably a good thing, because I think a proliferation of languages is not always a bad thing. For example, like if we had these tools, it would be much easier to build domain-specific languages.
Yeah.
It actually would be really nice if there was a lifter that you could debug against. if there was a intermediate representation for, and I know Solidity is working on Yule, and there's some like Slith IR stuff and whatnot.
Yeah.
But if there was an IR, it would be nice, because then lifting EVM, especially if the IR represented both EWASM and EVM, because then the debugging process would be the same.
So I thought about creating a code generator for LLVM IR to EVM. And I think that would have a number of benefits, because LLVM is already a compiler target for a lot of languages like C and C++. So you might be able to compile like some of that to EVM if we had that code generator.
And isn't WASM an output too?
Yeah, WASM is an output already there.
Boom.
So it would make perfect sense for LLVM to be the IR.
Yeah, there's been a lot of chatter about that. I think definitely the right way to go. It's just a matter of getting it going.
Yeah, and it's also, so lifting at least, so LLVM to EVM obviously is relatively straightforward, right? You linearize your operations, and then you just translate registers as a file to stack locations, and then you reify into the actual EVM operations. But going the other direction, lifting EVM to LLVM is the non-trivial side, because of how stack and things work. That's part of why EIP 615 is so intriguing, because it makes that a lot more straightforward.
Yeah.
Which EIP was that again? 615?
Yeah, that's the static jumps in Go sub.
Okay, yep. I remember that one.
That's what Bryant and I were talking about earlier with regard to the EVM evolution. There's the Spade folks are working on some really neat changes to the EVM to make analysis much more straightforward. So like there would be no more dynamic jumps in EVM. You would know the exact location of a jump at any given time. So which is nice, right? Obviously it makes it much more straightforward to analyze. So
yeah.
I can't even think of a good use case for a dynamic jump.
So we've written ETFs with dynamic jumps that were pretty malicious.
Yes.
Like we figured out how to embed like arbitrary delegate calls and string constants. And then if you had, like an unbalanced stack, you could take one of these like weird dynamic jumps to that string constant. So, I mean, there is some cool stuff that you can do with it, but it's probably good if we get rid of that.
I mean, cool is not what you want to hear about something that registers like this much money, right?
Oh, I totally agree. Like, we were just trying to see what we could do with it that was malicious, but
no.
Yeah, it should definitely be, taken behind the barn.
When the use cases for making cool things that do malicious stuff is more than the use case for actually using it, then that's a problem.
Can you build function types without dynamic jumps?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because you just static jump to the place. Well, actually, I don't know. Now that
you can, of course, but they're actually going to add a Go sub style dispatch as well. So there would be static jumps and then a Go sub, which like sets up the stack and things like that. So I would recommend reading EIP 615 because they did a really good job in presenting it, and anything Bryant and I will say and Alex will say is going to be watering down the good work that they did, but they documented it pretty well, and it's pretty nicely laid out.
Especially what I say.
And me. Sounds good though.
So the author of it is Greg Colvin, and he worked at Oracle for many years in the JVM.
He was the speeding up the EVM guy, right?
Yeah. His whole thing is like the EVM design is like from the early 60s.
Yeah.
It is, right? It's just J. Peter Landon's SECD machine with a few other things and a Harvard architecture for memory.
I think you're right about that.
I mean, to be fair, WASM is also an SECD machine as well. It's just that they've added some of the stuff that Koopman did in the late 80s. So we've gotten to the 80s there. we're moving forward a couple years. So
Why do you think our tech stack is so far behind? I mean, do you think it's just because of like how I don't know how difficult like creating a functioning blockchain is, or do you think it has more to do with the
I would say it's mostly because it's created by researchers and like with a lot of different levels of expertise that isn't necessarily specific to VM design.
well, and stack VMs are super easy to target. Like it's very easy to generate stack machines. They're great for learning how virtual machines are. They're great for targeting as a compiler designer. Like there's mechanizations from CPS and ANF right to stack machines. I mean, it's really great from a theoretical perspective. It's just that speed very often is prohibited or limited unless you put a lot of effort into it. Like the JVM is a stack machine, but they've poured millions, if not billions of dollars into that thing in order to make it really fast. So, we could do the same with EVM. I think some of the Spade folks have some really great ideas there, and there's a potential, but it's like you have to really pour the elbow grease into it.
And I just think in general, simpler is better. So I think it's better to be simple than fast for the security use case. Eventually, you do need to be fast to like support the level of transactions we all want to support, but don't compromise security to get there.
All right. Well, I think I need to hop off for our stand up today, but nice call, guys.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, for everybody else who is still around, I mean, it is 12 o'clock Mountain Time, so we're at the hour, which is the normal allotted time. If you guys want to keep hanging out and chatting, happy to like extend it out to 12:20 or so, about when we actually started, or we can call it now. Either way.
I had a topic that I kind of wanted to bring up. It seems like it might be more beneficial to start hopping around, like who's hosting the call, so it's not all falling on you.
Sure, we can do that.
What do you think of that?
I mean, I'm definitely open to it. It just takes the coordination of, figuring out who's going to do it when.
What does everyone else think about that in terms of like a larger governance kind of decision?
I mean, I'm certainly fine with that. The only worry I have is that this is the first time Kevin has had an issue. Whereas if you ask more people to do it, there's more potential for people to completely forget that they're supposed to do it. So, like I don't disagree that decentralizing it away from Kevin means that more people can help with it, but also Kevin has been doing really well. Sorry, Kevin.
Yeah, I agree.
That's totally fine. And I'm happy to be like a default, I'm happy to be the one who organizes it. And then I can delegate that on to somebody else and know that if it's not delegated or if the call hasn't started on time or whatever, then I can, take that charge.
Yeah, I think just having maybe one backup person who could do it is not bad, but we don't have to go nuts beyond that,
Yeah.
Sure.
Like Bryant is pretty much always around, so it's Bryant. Like if Kevin is not there and Bryant is not there, probably the meeting shouldn't happen anyway. So.
Oh yeah. It would be nicer to have more structure to it, though.
Oh yeah, I don't disagree. I just mean coming up with that is non-trivial too. But if you can do that and figure out a way that it's easy for folks to get in on the governance, and we're not all like constantly scrambling for who's supposed to be leading this week, I'm all for it.
What do you guys think about having these calls be recorded. There's a lot of chatter this past few weeks about, recording calls versus Chatham House rules and all that.
I mean, I'm familiar with Chatham House. I'm also familiar with TLP, with Traffic Light Protocol, and I pretty much assume that most of these meetings are like TLP green, like they're meant to be consumed by the community and distributed amongst the community, maybe even TLP white. So I try not to be an asshole on these and like keep the cursing to a minimum so that they can be like widely shared and at least from my perspective, like I'm pretty relaxed on them, So I'm okay with them being recorded and whatnot. If there's something that needs to be dealt with that's a personal matter, I'm fine treating it as a TLP red. But I think it's okay to just have everything be TLP green or white by default.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like the intention, right? This is meant to be a community call, so it's open and consumable by all.
What do you think about the agendas on? So right now we're doing them all kind of in a Google Doc. Maybe we can do it in like a GitHub issue in the EthSecurity repo.
Totally, we can absolutely move to that.
So that way it's a little bit more open.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, completely agree on that one.
Okay, good. Just different things I've been thinking about when I get people's opinions.
Sweet. Well, Bryant, do you want to have a chat at some point offline and nail down some different things?
Sure. Stefan, you want to be a part of that?
Yeah, that's fun.
Cool.
Sweet.
Because you're the third most often person in these things between you and
Dang
Dan.
it.
Cool, guys. Yeah, I guess maybe we'll start a group on Telegram so we can set another time. I know I have to do something at 12:30, so I can't. I mean, we have 24 minutes right now until then. If you want to get into it, or we can schedule another time.
I mean, I'm fine getting into it now. I think also probably Jared from QuantStamp should be at some point.
Yep. Yeah.
Maybe
We also. It just occurred to me that last time we said we were going to do these calls, we were going to move these calls to Thursday, partly for Australia and partly for Jared.
Yeah.
So, yeah, really messed up this week. Sorry, everybody.
It's no worries. To be fair, I did get the guidelines meeting moved to Thursday so that Jared can more easily join. So we didn't completely forget.
Okay. Cool. So there were just a couple action items we had just talked about. So one being the having a second kind of explicit organizer. I mean, Bryant is certainly an organizer within EthSecurity, but at least for these community calls. I'm going to just write this in the group chat because I'm not sure where else to put it for the moment. The other was, well, there's actually moving to a Thursday.
Yeah.
Having agendas in GitHub. And I believe there was a fourth one. Anything else that we had just talked about?
I just had to follow up on the debugger and whatnot, and some of the stuff on the repo thing. I mean, on the ETH-PM stuff, but I don't think there's anything there. It's the moving this to Thursday, making sure that we have multiple maintainers, and moving the issues to GitHub, right?
Yeah, those are the big three that I got.
Okay. Yeah.
Do we need like a project within our GitHub repo for this?
I was just making them now.
Okay, cool. Should we like backfill that project with previous agendas and call notes, or should we just keep going forward from here?
It's an idea.
What was that, Brian? I didn't understand you.
That's an idea.
Oh, okay. Cool. One other technical point, as far as having like this, the redundant organizer for the community calls. Right now we're on Zoom. Actually, Rex had brought up us like getting a EthSecurity Zoom. Do we need that, or should we just use somebody in the community Zoom? Like right now, I'm using Mitch's Zoom account, but last week he jumped on and it cut the call off early. I know this conversation has happened multiple times, so it'd be nice to just get something and not have to worry about it.
Yeah.
But my sub point to that was like, so this call couldn't start until I started the call because I was the organizer. Do you know if there's a way to add a second organizer to a Zoom call?
I don't know.
Okay. I guess we'll figure that out. Along with having the agendas on GitHub, should we have like, a skeleton calendar of expected dates on the repo as well?
That's a good idea. Or just like every, we plan on doing it every 2 weeks, blah, blah. Something where it should be obvious how.
Right. I mean, so right now the source of truth is like my Google Calendar.
Yeah.
And it'd be nice if that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I agree. Cool.
Or if you're starting that GitHub project, would you be willing to add that document, Brian?
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll do that. Trying to see. Oh yeah, I gotta add in. How about that?
Cool. And then another action point would be add wish list to GitHub. That probably just needs to be a document. In which repo or which project should that go? Guess I can figure that out on my own. So you created the community project?
Yeah, I'm adding in a issued template for agendas.
Okay. I suppose this wish list could live in the README. Has something about community calls, calendar, wish list.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. So we said 1 p.m. Pacific time to get the most amount of coverage across time zones. Last call?
Yeah. I think that's what was suggested.
Okay.
I don't remember.
So next meeting will be on the 13th.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. We can figure out whether to have one on the New Year.
Yeah,
Or,
on the 27th. I won't be able to make that one.
or if you want to move it to the New Year or something.
Yeah, the week after.
Yeah.
The 3rd.
Yep.
Okay, I'll put it in as the 27th for now. We can talk about it. See, on the next call, we can see who will be around for each, which is more preferable, or whether we just skip that one and go to the second week of January.
Okay. Are you writing in the README right now?
I am writing the README.
Okay, cool. I want to make sure. So we'll do agenda items here. We'll do general information about meeting structures and different logistical information. What else?
I'm gonna just copy paste in that wish list, community project wish list for.
That's a good one.
I guess maybe it's like wish list for funding and then wish list for projects, which go hand in hand, but maybe it's worth breaking them out.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be cool.
And I mean, I guess the only other thing to figure out is like, I just need to figure out how to get a second organizer onto Zoom, and whether we want to have, we need to figure out like a consistent Zoom that we won't get kicked off of, like I am with Mitch's.
Yeah, that's important.
And I'm sure somebody in the community has one that they'd be willing to allow us to use.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you guys have anything else? I feel like I've got some action items to do that I'm probably just gonna keep working on here, but I don't know if we need to stay on the call.
Any other? I don't have anything.
I'm good.
Cool. Thanks for being here, guys. I guess we'll chat in a couple weeks.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Adios.
See you.
Bye.